Good evening, and welcome to the Dr. Kennedy Podcast. The Dr. Kennedy Podcast is sponsored by the Daniels Foundation for Impact Investments and Development. All videos or ownership of the Daniels Foundation for Impact and Development and all support can be found at the Daniels Foundation Impact Development's website at daniels-foundation.org. Hey folks, how you doing? Coming to you from nice and toasty, warm, sunny Florida. Notice that we got the short sleeves on for you folks up north there. Hope you're enjoying those snowstorms. And guess who we have tonight? We have Jeffrey Lee. And Jeff is a professor at Essex County College in the science department. And Jeff has been into science and math for a long time. I consider Jeff a friend. We go all the way back to Washington School. And for Jeff, I want to say thank you, Jeff, for being a friend and considering to do this interview without hesitation. And for those who know Jeff, Jeff is a great guy, very serious guy, always conscientious, and doesn't have a bad bone in his body. And just love Jeff in terms of what he's meant for a role model for me, pushing me academically. I was always trying to keep up with Jeffrey Lee. And, that was my father. What did Jeffrey get? It's like, well, Jeff got A's. Jeff got all A's, so I had to get all A's. So that was always pressure that, my standard of role model of a person as a student role model was Jeffrey Lee. And I just wanted to keep up in terms of scientifically, Jeff. I wanted to be just as scientifically as competitive as Jeffrey Lee. Jeff background, he went on from, just think about this for Jeffrey Lee. Talking about early 1970s, he's one of the first African Americans from East Orange to attend MIT. That's kind of a very significant accomplishment going on at MIT, and then from there going to be a university professor and doing a diligent job of teaching the students at Essex County College. They're very lucky to have someone with caliber of Jeffrey Lee. And I say with all sincerity, I'm very lucky to have someone with caliber of Jeffrey Lee as a friend and as a colleague in terms of doing a program like this. And hopefully tonight you enjoy the interview with Jeff Lee and see what the contribution that Jeff has made to science, education, educating many students here in Essex County area, particularly area of science. So important for our community as we go forward in terms of the area of, STEM, science, technology, essentially excellence in math, and all these things. And so now they call it STEAM or STEAM. All these things are important for our community to advance forward to be competitive. And it's individuals such as Jeff Lee to make that possible. Make sure that people are at the forefront of their academics and able to do research. All these areas require research skills, computer skills, and someone of Jeff Lee's caliber is able to talk about those things. So please welcome me and welcoming Jeff Lee tonight, and sit back, have a cold beverage or a hot beverage if you like. And I think you're going to enjoy Jeffrey Lee. To another side, we'll say hello to Jeff. Thank you very much. Hey guys, how you doing? Guess who I have here? Jeff Lee. And Jeff, good to see you. How you doing?
Good. How's it going, Ken?
Doing fine. Thanks for agreeing to do the interview. And to get started here, why don't we just have you take a couple minutes here to, say hello to the folks, man, what you've been up to lately. Anything you want to say just as an intro to, people out in TV land?
Hey, everybody out there, particularly those who are from back in the day in East Orange. Hopefully everybody is safe, warm, washing their hands, and getting through all this COVID nonsense. 21's going to be a better year.
Yeah, that's great, Jeff. That's great advice there. So let's go ahead and jump into some questions. So, first I want to thank you for agreeing to do the interview. Like I said, you were a trooper. I asked, and I can see you as a friend going back to Washington School. We got memories. I joked in the introduction that every time I come home to the grave, my father said, what did Jeffrey Lee get? So you were my competition. I was like, well, Jeff got an A. He's like, I couldn't lie. Jeff got an A. He said, well, how come you didn't get an
A? I'm sorry he pushed you like that, man.
He pushed me, man. I was like, I want to thank you for pushing me, because like you were my competition, like
for 12 years.
Right, for 12 years, right? You my science class and everything.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little about your formal education? I know where you went, but others may not know. and some of your job experience, and maybe a formal introduction about some of your early career experiences.
Cool. So after graduating East Orange High School in 1978, I went a little ways north up to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Hmm.
Graduated from there, went south, North Carolina State, picked up a PhD in microbiology. Then, let's see, Princeton for a couple of postdoctoral jobs. Then I had a position at a company in Yonkers that at the time was working on some medical testing. That was about a year. And then I was looking to do something that did not require a 3.5 hour commute. And I noticed that the county college in Essex was hiring. So on the way home one day, I stopped off and went in for the interview. And, 2 weeks later, you want the job? Okay, cool, I'll take it. And 27 years later, still there, still working with amazing, amazing students who sometimes, like we were back in the day, were dismissed because of where they came from or their neighborhoods, but
Hmm.
who really have amazing, amazing talent.
Hmm.
And it's been great. It's been an experience. I just got off on a call before this meeting with some of them who are now reaching out to other students, encouraging them to go further in terms of scholarships and travel abroad once travel comes back and the like. So, and then in like around 2000, I was getting a little bored. So I found a online degree. So I got a degree from Mississippi State University in geoscience. So we were trying to go into some environmental science courses, but nobody really had that discipline. So I said, okay, I'll get another degree. Fine. So that allows me to work on those programs at the college, which we have moving cross with Rutgers, so that when we go back and forth, we have somebody who has some expertise in that area. So yeah, I've been, school, libraries, and all that pretty much since,
Right.
age 6.
Wow, just that's amazing. It's because I always want to know how you ended up at Essex. They're lucky to have you,
Mm-hmm.
and like you're saying, it's very rewarding because as you know, myself, I'm a college professor,
Mm-hmm.
and we know the mission, teaching, research, service, the mantra, right?
Oh yeah.
And people don't realize first how hard teaching is.
Mm.
It's a physical job. It takes a certain amount of dedication and standard excellence. It's not like you're looking for a tip. You're not going to get a tip for teaching. So
Yeah.
for them to have you there all those years, and we know how the raises come and go, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you could tell some stories, and maybe we'll get into a little of that about Essex.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just nice that you had the dedication. So that's a nice story. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go on. So I knew your mom and dad,
Mm-hmm.
kind of vaguely. We kind of knew each other's parents, but
Oh yeah.
not intimately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can you discuss your family structure and the influence that the family had on you in terms of your aspirations?
Sure. So, and you're right. I'll say it. Back in the day, all of our parents knew everybody else's parents, and so yeah, family was big. Dad passed away in '08. Mom's still around.
Okay.
She'll be 90 next April.
Hmm.
Still as sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
And I have my two younger brothers, John and Bill,
Yeah.
and a lot of it was this what you would think of as the in the old days the nuclear family, where you go to school, you come home, you wash the dishes, you take out the garbage. And so we were kept on a fairly straight path. Occasionally, church on Sundays. As you get older, like I have to go to church. Well, sometimes not. But
Right.
you had the immediate family, plus you had the extended family. So, for example, to do some name dropping, Dale Colston was across the street. Mr. and Mrs. Colston knew me,
Right. Hmm.
and Richard Smith was down the street. His mom knew me,
Right.
and so it was a community. It was a neighborhood,
Right.
and your parents knew me. If we went to Washington, all of our parents knew each other,
Right.
and that helped in terms of not just giving you a sense of community, but a sense of belonging. You knew if something happened or there was an issue, you had people you could go to.
Hmm.
And we also knew that if we cut up or did the wrong thing somewhere, there'd be somebody that'd see it.
Somebody's gonna
And
see
for
it.
sure, my parents would find out about it.
Right.
So it
Yes.
sort of it kept you in line. It kept you in
That's right.
line.
It was a
But then
village. Yes,
also,
it's true.
true. I also had, at least on my mom's side, a very extended family of aunts, uncles, and cousins, and it was great at the time because I had about 4 or 5 cousins who were like 10 years older than me,
Hmm.
and they're like you. They're all big. They're all over 6 foot. So I'm this little kid, and I'd go and play with them, and they let me play with them. And these monstrous men who are now my uncles and cousins,
Right.
and between them, the older aunts, like it gave you a sense of belonging to family, and it really does help in terms of when you grow up and then you have your own kids like I do now.
Hmm.
And while there's fewer family members, we still maintain those ties, and they have the cousins, and of course a lot of them now will, not particularly now with the plague, not so much connecting through family meetings or the like, but we still do the Zoom calls, they still do the texting, and
Hmm.
so those connections stay there, and that's one of the things that really did help,
Right.
particularly back in the '60s and '70s, growing up in East Orange.
Right. Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. I'm glad you shared that, the whole community and village. I think that's important for people to get that. Part of this reason of doing this podcast, I'm doing the second book, which is actually talk about the time period of the 1960s as the children of pretty much a burgeoning middle class and what has now become of those children.
Hmm.
And so you're part of that. It's kind of knowing
Yeah.
that we had Head Start, we had Manpower, there was a
Hmm.
lot of government intervention. People call it welfare, or social welfare at that time. It was the Great Society welfare programs,
Oh yeah.
basically injected funds into the black middle class that lifted out from maybe let's say it was industrial blue class to professional.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that started happening. That transformation happened during the 60s. So it's not really well understood the significance of that and told in humanistic terms that you're not talking about in terms of data.
Yes.
And so that's what the book Black Camelot's trying to do. I'm trying to transfer from a
Nice
technical
title.
writer to a humanistic writer.
Agree.
And so we'll see. I got some grants for it, and this hope you agree to be maybe part of that. I have to ask for your permission at some point in terms of
Oh
your
yeah. We'll,
story.
we'll do the sign off. Yeah, I'd love to be part of it. That's great.
So that's the purpose. Some people might want to know, why am I doing this? That's kind of the
Hmm.
purpose of this. And that if it all comes together, it's going to be fascinating because there's so many different stories of success.
True.
And people are shocked. Like I did Rob Everett, and
Hmm.
before you, there was Ken Johnston, and then there
Yeah.
was Rudy Cafelli. You might know him as an educator in the
Mhm.
area. So it's just amazing. So getting back to you, so what are some of your memories about growing up in East Orange, and what you think about the state of East Orange and North today?
Well, it's kind of interesting you mentioned Head Start. I remember going to Head Start. I'm going to say it was 65.
Mm-hmm.
There was
You
this
started, yeah.
building that was behind the Howard Johnsons. It used to be on Central Avenue across the street from the hospital.
Mhm.
And that was my memory of going to school there before we started Washington.
Really?
And
Okay.
I just, I liked it. And it was, then I have memories of Washington, the playground,
Yeah.
kickball,
Yeah.
some of the more athletic guys in the class, such as yourself, kicking the ball over everybody's head. Um,
Yeah.
but I also, it's kind of funny. I remember we had a class once at Washington. I'm going to say, I think it was fifth grade. So it'd be like 71,
Yeah.
70 or 71. So fourth or fifth grade. And you and I and others were on the same class. And I remember the girls in the class asked why they had to wear dresses to school. Why couldn't they wear pants? Because they wore pants,
I
on the
remember that,
weekends and
right?
stuff.
I know where you're going with
And
this. Yeah.
teacher said, I don't know. And so they checked. It's like, nothing in writing says you can't. You want to wear pants, wear pants. So I just remember that.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Yeah, well, let them wear pants. What does it matter? But the beginning of that social change was just wild. And
Yeah.
then in the '70s, I was a tennis player, so I spent my time over at Elmwood Park.
Yeah.
So that would have been me, Neil Banks, Gary Hale, and a
Mhm.
few others. And, those were our, part of the fall, but for the most part, those were our summers.
Gotcha.
And I also remember brick church section over by Main Street. There used to be a Blimpies
Yes.
next to
Right.
the
Good
Goodyear
looking.
tire store. And if I felt I had the money and the time, I'd treat myself and walk over for a sub.
Right.
Now I like what I see in East Orange and Newark because what I'm seeing change for particularly in Newark for years. A lot of the stuff left over from '67, the lots and everything. There was no turnover. And then it's funny because driving when I go to work, when I go to Essex,
Hmm.
I'm in Plainfield now, so I usually take either 78 or 22 and
Yeah.
then come up through the South Ward.
Hmm.
And I've seen the older buildings go down, the newer buildings go up,
Hmm.
turnover of lots, new businesses, and and likewise in East Orange with the condos and such. And like a couple now more going up by Crescent, by where my mom lives,
Right.
and that's what you want to see. And I remember telling my dad, gosh, about 30 years ago or so, in the 80s, new groups started moving, in particular the Haitian community, into Newark.
Hmm.
And they bought up land nobody else wanted, fixed it up, changed things, and it was new growth. And you continue to see in Newark and now in East Orange that kind of turnover. If everything stayed the same as it was 40 years ago, I'd feel sad. That would mean everybody left, nobody came back, there was no growth. And it's different. They're different languages, they're different cultures. Our old high school is gone. I realize they have this thing called East Orange, I guess is
Campus. East
yeah,
Orange
East
campus.
Orange campus.
Yeah.
But crossing the Panther with a Scotty, nah, that ain't gonna fly.
That's not
So
right.
it's okay. My high school's gone. That's cool.
Right.
But I like that I see that there's growth, there's change, and there are, particularly from I'll say from a school angle or education angle, people, the same way we were looking for opportunities and stuff when we were young, and our parents, like a lot of the ones on my block, at like for your book, a lot of them moved in. My parents moved out of Newark off of Farley Avenue. My mom was carrying me at the time, and they were painting a house around the time I was born. And that block and the other blocks there, Whittier and Irving, you had a lot of young black professionals or young black working class with young kids, and they had all moved in a lot from Newark and from other places.
Hmm.
And so you had that sort of new growth in that area. And now I'm seeing it with the new buildings. I've gone shopping a couple of times in town, and it's fun sometimes just walking through the aisles and listening to the conversations and watching, and you realize, the growth and the turnover in the town. And I think it's a great thing.
Right. Yeah. I see it also. You mentioned some of the condos town, or I guess in my case would be Harrison,
Hmm.
because they have this 10-story concept around the train station,
Yeah.
and that leads to a certain level of new growth coming, new talent.
Hmm.
Um, some people say that it may be a little start of a gentrification. I'm not sure we could say that. As you say, some of it's immigrant.
Hmm.
But you, like you said, it's a new populace, new day, new taxes, and something it can't stay stagnant, it has to change. So we'll keep an eye on that. Keep
Yeah.
interested to see that. So thanks for that. That's interesting.
Hmm.
So building on that for, let's say, high school now. What activities did you participate in high school, and how did high school prepare you for higher education? You said you went. I find it fascinating that I kind of knew you went to MIT.
Hmm.
But I'm curious if an East Orange High School education prepared you for the rigor of MIT and what you had to do to make up the. I think I know the answer, but I want to know the difference.
Yes. The short answer is yes, it did, and I've actually got proof. Uh,
Really?
oh yeah, oh yeah. But I'll start with that story.
Okay.
So I was taking a history course,
Mhm.
and it was one of my electives. I can't even remember which one it was, but it was you had to write papers. So I wrote papers. I got to be in the course, yay! But the thing was, the last, I guess the last, if not the last class, the last time I was talking to the professor about my work, he said throughout the entire semester, I've had issue with some of the things you wrote. So in terms of the content, but he said, I could never, and I tried, I could never find anything to fault in the structure of your papers. They're
Okay.
perfect. And I said, that's Mr. Rosenberg. That was my high school history teacher. We wrote a paper a night for the entire for the entire year.
Right.
So I can write because of him. And actually, I had a chance to go back before the tore the high school down. They had a honors ceremony, I think, in the early '90s. And
Uh-huh.
I talked to the students, and I said the reason I could write a paper now, and he was there. I said because he made us write papers for a year, like he made you write for a year. You know how to write papers the rest of your life. Doesn't matter. You know, somebody can fault you on what you wrote, they'll never be able to fault your structure.
Right.
He got us set for that. I remember that when we were seniors, when we were in, I guess, humanities with Miss Geimer, that was around the time I think it was the Board of Ed, had decided they weren't going to do AP courses. And the week after the meeting where they decided this, she came into class and said, "I don't care what the board said, you're getting the AP curriculum in here." And she, so she and Mr. Montgomery, they all taught us those, and Mr. Rosenberg taught us the upper level curriculum we needed.
Right.
And so on transfer, I got there, and the thing about MIT, you're pulling a whole bunch of smart people from all over the place, and you get there, and yeah, everybody's smart, and all of us struggle. So you find out where your strengths are, and like I found out I had to go for tutoring. Okay, so I did tutoring, I got better, but paper writing, my papers were always great, and it's because we used to every day eighth period we go in with the U shape with the desk in the U shape, and we this side argue this side argue that, and off we went. But also, I was on a tennis team for 4 years, basically because my mother, who was a secretary at Washington, knew Jim Firebrace because I believe he taught special ed somewhere, and she put me in this tennis program the summer, I guess, between seventh and eighth grade.
Uh-huh.
So when I got to high school, it was like, yeah, you're on the team, yay. So one of the things he taught is, we're not going to be that great, but we're going to learn, and we did. The first 2 years were okay. The second 2 years we were competing for state and, well, not state, regional. It was a different setup at the time, different regional tournaments,
Right.
and it was always that you go out, you do your best, you don't get frustrated. Um, Band for 4 years, that was fun. I remember that at one point, excuse me, they wanted to I think the board was looking at saving funds. So they were going to cut all the sports except football and basketball,
Yeah.
cut the arts, cut other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And so we went to, and yeah, you run basketball. So no offense, because, we had on retrospect, we had one of the amazing runs in basketball for the state at that time with you guys.
Right.
Between you, Montclair, and a few others, there were some great teams
Right.
came out of that time. But what we had to do was we all got dressed up in our uniforms and went to one of the board meetings and said, this is important to us. Please don't cut the funding. And so we kept it. But
Interesting.
it
Now I interviewed Ken Johnston earlier. Do you remember Ken Johnston?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you might want to take a look at his interview. And it's kind of interesting. He talked about band and the importance of the band. And it's interesting how he said that set his foundation. What you're saying is that set a foundation, set of standards, and so forth.
Yeah.
Because you guys were excellent. I mean, the band was no joke. It was pretty rigorous.
Oh no, that was Vernon Ross. He worked us, and the funny thing is, he worked us. He pushed us. We pushed back because, of course, routines.
Mm-hmm.
But then we'd go out places, and just even if we're just going through the basic motions, and you could see just the difference in the polish and the style we had as compared to some other groups. And he continued that after I left. My middle brother John was in band, and they went to competitions, and they did really great stuff. And so it was the training and the discipline. And
Ken mentioned that band was your homeroom also. Was that the case when you were there also? That you were...
Yeah. So it was homeroom for 4 years. Yeah. So you just go in the side door, and it was kind of nice though, because your locker's right there. You have your own bathroom. It was, and also if you had time between, I didn't use it, but if there was like time between class or one class wasn't running because of some reason, you could always go back there. Well, you've got 40 minutes, go practice. So you'd go in a room and practice or something. Right. So once again, it gave that that sense of community. Right. But the school, what I always liked about the teachers is they never they saw us for who we were. They saw we had potential.
Mhm.
And even though it's interesting, one of the things people don't often understand is a good teacher will look past the outside of the students. And at the time, most of my teachers were white, and most of our students were black. And the ones I had didn't care. They taught us. They gave us what we needed. It was great. And it's interesting. Mr. Gatilla was my English teacher in first and third in freshman and junior year.
Mhm.
And my daughter graduated from Union Catholic in 2014. And senior year, she's talking about her senior English professor, and she starts describing the guy. And I'm thinking, what's his name? Just go something Gatilla, I think. I said, what's he look like? Uh, Short, this, that, sort of mousy. I got my yearbook. That's my 78 yearbook. This is like 2014.
Right.
This the guy? Yeah, that's him. So I found him, and we went out. Me and the family went out to lunch together, and he the same way he encouraged writing. Still, when we were there, he was with Rox's class, and Rox is a writer, and she likes to write children's stories and short fiction. So he was encouraging her writing. So you see that love for teaching, and it was evident in the teachers that they wanted to give us the best. And it's just nice to sometimes be able to contact them even now for those who are still with us, and just tell them the impact they made. You said them at Essex. Now, one of the things that really makes me sad at Essex sometimes is the people that come in, the students, and they come from sometimes family backgrounds where they're told, well, you can't do this, you can't do this. And I say, well, what do you want to do? Example, one guy said he wanted to go to med school. I said, okay. But he said, well, my family said I can't do it, and my preacher says I can't do it, and my friends say I can't do it. I said, well, I think you can do it. I look at the class. What do y'all think? They said, yeah, we think you can do it. I said, so we think you can do it. If you think you can do it, just do it.
Right.
So yeah, that encouragement was always there. I've had other teachers,
Mhm.
usually at the grad school level, where you could tell they weren't exactly happy with having some students have very melanin content. But in our time, at least at my time in East Orange, that was never the case.
We're going to shift gears now to kind of your profession now. So
Hmm.
I know you're a professor at Essex County College.
Hmm.
Can you talk about the role of community college in respect to delivery of education services to the general population, in particular the scientific stuff like STEM that is so important for the new wave of innovation and technology that's coming in the economy?
Sure. And I'll tell you now, the answer would have been different a year ago, but
Really?
plague. So it sort of shifted everything. Where actually what's happening is a lot of higher ed is being rewritten, not just in terms of delivery aspects, but now in terms of as we get into 21, as the vaccines become available, as we get back to in person instruction or more regular in person instruction, what are the things that are really relevant? One of the things that's interesting is there is, and in terms of community colleges, the big thing with community colleges, and I'll say this when I talk to people about any county college or community college, they meet people where they are and give them what they need. We're open access, which means that you don't need SATs, you don't need recommendations. It used to be, if you've got a high school transcript and $15, welcome to Essex. Then we waive the application fee. Well, if you've got a high school diploma or something even like that, and we have other, if you don't have that, you have other education, fine. So you take people where they are. Okay, where do you want to go? And then you try to get them to where they want to go. Sometimes it's the long road. I want to come in. I want to do this. I want to get a doctorate. I want to go to pharmacy school. For some people, it's one class. A few years back, I remember one winter. We have a winter intersession that goes for like 10 to 15 days in between the fall and spring, and I got a call from a parent in Newark. His daughter was varsity basketball somewhere in Connecticut. I don't think it was UConn, it was somewhere else. and she needed to take a course to maintain eligibility. Which course? Doesn't matter. Have that do the course. Okay, here's the course, here's the setup. Call me if anything goes wrong. I checked in a couple of weeks, everything worked. She got what she needed. She's still on the team, life went on. So she needed one course. That was it. But we gave her what she needed. What's going to happen, I think, moving forward, there'll be aspects of this, the Zoom and the like, that will keep. There are aspects that work fairly well for meetings and the like. And one of the things I think it points out is you don't need to be physically together for every single meeting. I was an administrator for 4 years before I came back into faculty this year. And, you spent 5 days, practically your entire day was going back and forth to meetings. And a lot of it can be done this way, so you can use the face-to-face time for other things. One thing I like, and this, I may push this at Essex, something MIT did, a couple of professors who were STEM professors, they realized they had to make some adjustments, with the plague and all. So what they did is they preloaded their lectures, they preloaded their assignments and their problem sets and their homeworks, and made all that available to the students. And the time they would have spent in lecture, they made their office hours. And it was just so much more efficient, and it just flowed better. And I was thinking, what a great idea. Save the face-to-face time for what you really need. Well, one of the things that's happened to some extent, it was happening before COVID, but with the advent of more tech, particularly PowerPoints, I'll say from about '04, '05 forward maybe, I noticed, 90, when I got there in 93 to about '05, standard lectures, drawing on a board, a few other things. With the advent of PowerPoints, a lot of that dropped away, and I would do evaluations of some professors, and there were some professors sometimes that just stand there, read, click, read, click. I'm thinking, what's this? This makes no sense. So I think it'll get us back to, there's certain aspects you can give the students to work on their own, but then the ones that you're going to do face to face, like for STEM, say for the laboratory experiences, that's the part you want to focus on. So I think it's going to get us rethink a lot about STEM education in terms of what's needed. There was a need for allied health and health science before. Boy, is that going up now. So that's going to increase. You're going to see probably more in terms of public health. I've noticed a shift occurring over the last 10 years or so, where fewer people want to go to med school to be a doctor to have their own practice, more want to pick up not just medical, but other degrees in social science and the like in business, so they can have a broader impact in terms of public health. I see it in business. You also see a lot more interactive learning where you have people who will pick up a degree in a STEM and a degree in something else. For example, my daughter has Northeastern in Boston, had just started when she finished her environmental science degree at Simmons College up there. She wasn't sure what to do. Northeastern had just started a new program in environmental science and policy that was taught by professors from the science department and professors from the social science department. So you combine the environmental science aspects and then the government policy aspects into one program. And you're seeing more and more of that crossover. And I suspect moving into 21, you'll have the increase in STEM, you'll still have the need for the allied health, but you're going to see more of it combined with other aspects of other disciplines. So that's where I think that's going to be going.
Let me just quickly follow up because I want to jump something up. But
Mhm.
in my university experience, we were kind of labeled that broadly as experiential learning.
Yeah.
And so, there's pros and cons of experiential learning. Like you're saying, well, you give up lecture for office hours. There's a trade-off there because, clearly there's some value to lecture. It doesn't have to be a formal lecture, but
Sure.
so I guess the question would be, as we shift to this more experiential learning model, what emphasis should we put on actual exams and testing of validation of what was actually learned, and what it should be in terms of saying, okay, as you know, some people can't take a test,
Yeah.
but they can do the job.
Yes.
So you get my point. How do we know? Okay, if you can do the job, does the exam matter? But if you can't do the job, you can't do you can't do the test. We got a problem there too. So
True.
what's the balance there? You get my point.
Oh yeah, I get you. So what I think is going to happen there is part of the, and we're doing it now at Essex. We're going through. We began a. It's really a 3-year. It's a 5-year process. So in 2 years, we're going to evaluate all of our programs, and then the next 3 years, we'll start a process of 3-year continual reevaluation. So it'll be the beginning of a cycle of 3-year evaluations of third of the programs every year, every 3 years. And one of the things, and I know for the biology program I've been working on, one of the things it requires us to do is look at the program and just say, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to learn? What do you want them to leave with? And in working with my colleagues, I've said, I got here in '93 and this program really hasn't changed. I said, I can probably go back and get books from the '80s and the program hasn't changed. It's never really been looked at that closely. So we're starting, and others I know are going to start back with, okay, what do you need to learn? Once we know what we want them to know, okay, now what's critical? How do we assess?
Mhm.
And then that will, to an extent, help with the testing in terms of your now, sorry, I got a little fly in here. That'll help with the, okay, here's what we want them to know coming out. So to assess that, we have these learning outcomes. Okay, great. Then you've got test anxiety, test fear. I know it's tricky with testing. I know from experience, I taught this spring a non-majors bio course, and that's usually one of the trickier ones to do because a lot of students come in, they have non-STEM programs at Essex. They've practically completed. They're doing this course as a science elective before graduation, and a lot of them take it last because they're afraid. And my first day in class, and this is all via Zoom, I said, in the chat, just put, do you have any fears in this class and why? And, some said that there's pretty much a fear of math. And I said, okay, math, nothing to be afraid of. You'll see numbers like 7, 12. It's not high level math. It's very simple arithmetic stuff,
Yep.
maybe the ratio.
Yep.
But it's, I said, there's nothing in this. You should never come into a class afraid. There's nothing you have here to fear.
Right.
And
Good thing it didn't take me. Nice guy, Jeff. I mean, look, I'll fail you.
I know. Well, if the numbers matter, yeah, okay, you can't do it. But for this one, with people that are basically non-majors, I said the big issue is to give you an understanding of different aspects of bio you can carry in other aspects of your life. If you were doing, I'd go through the course and I'd say things like, okay, we look at maybe genetics, and I'd say, if we were in my majors course, we'd be doing this, we'd be looking at certain aspects, numbers important. Right now, the idea is what's the overall impact, etc. So you see fears with that, but you also see, I don't know, a lot is put on the test. The test can be, you can always re-gear the assessment as to what you need them to know. I think part of it, once again, left when we got PowerPoints in I guess the early 2000s. We also started getting a whole lot of test banks, and so it's very easy to use a publisher's test bank, which is invariably multiple choice. Okay, here's your test, and at the time they would fill it out on the Scantron. You run the Scantron. Well, a lot of those tests aren't. I used to write tests for ACT, so I get a rough idea on them. Some of the questions just and I would say are worded wrong or badly. And I'd sometimes bring exams in and I'd say, okay, so see how they wrote this, and I'd go through the English levels or other aspects. So that's also one of the fears. If it's like for a lot of people at Essex, English is not their first, second, maybe even third language, and now you're taking this test and you're trying to back translate to your own language, but even the original sentence for English isn't written well, it becomes an issue. And testing's an issue now just because I know even with lockdown browsers like Respondus, how do you know the people taking the test are actually taking the test? And so it becomes, like I said, it's tricky in that you want, like I said, what we're doing now, I think will help because we're going all the way back to, which we've never really done, at least in my time in college. What do we want them to know? what's the mission, what's the goal? The mission in one sentence is this. The goal in one sentence is this. Okay, now, what are the learning outcomes? We'd like them to understand, okay, and then you gear up from there. I think that'll help us to, if we go back to writing our own tests, write better assessments. And it may be that you don't need as much, it depends on what it is. You don't need as much written assessment. For example, in any nursing program, I'll use ours for an example, you have lecture, you have lab, and you have clinical. You can be perfect. You can have hundreds in lecture and hundreds in the lab. But when you're on the clinical site, if you can't do the clinical, it's all, I mean, it doesn't matter what your other grades are. Nursing is based on helping people. That's what the clinical part is about.
Right.
Or if you're, I'll use an example. I know some of the county colleges have automotive programs. You can be really great, in terms of the written stuff and on the exams, but if you can't get the right cross connectors when you're changing out a transmission or the like, then you just can't. I mean, it's just not for you. And that does sometimes happen where, like in our case for nursing, there are people that are great students, have wonderful GPAs, they want to be a nurse, they get in there, and it's just not something they can do. But testing is always going to be that thing. You got to go.
You can't look at blood. You can't be a nurse, right?
There was actually one person. One of the nurses told me a story about one student who went in, and this is back when one of the first things they would do on. Now you have machines that help you do it, but there was a time when you would actually have to physically rotate a patient.
Right.
And that was one of the first things they did. And so they're in the first clinical, and the student was asked to help this other student in rotating the patient. And the student didn't want to do it. How come? I don't like touching people. And I'm thinking, well, if you don't like touching people, why did you choose this for a career? This is all you do is touch, so she went on and found other things to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, testing's always going to be the trick. And I think like what I'll do in mine is in my courses, what do I need them to know? Like, for example, I also teach a microbiology course basically to people in allied health programs. I have to get them to understand why washing their hands is important. If you can come out and you've got that, great, because for you, that's the big takeaway. So when you're in the hospital or something and you see wash your hands, and this is pre-COVID, I'm sure it'll be similar. Wash your hands before you go in. Wash your hands before you go out. They've gone through the procedures and have an understanding of why. So that when they're in the field, oh yeah, I'm doing this because if I don't, these things will happen. So as we do more of those assessments, particularly, like I said, in a post-COVID world, hopefully we can find better testing mechanisms and hopefully have a better assessment of what the students are actually learning, what the students actually need.
Okay, so let's drill down a little bit more on that student body at Essex County, because I think it's really, when I was at Virginia Commonwealth, we had one of the most diverse student bodies in the country. And that was, leveraged as a positive and benefit for attraction of students internationally, so forth. So, Essex County College has a pretty diverse student body. You kind of mentioned that. But my question is, what role should diversity play in education? In particular, what role should diversity play in education for predominantly white institutions?
Wonderful question. And it should be something encouraged and embraced. I'll do it in two parts. At Essex, it is amazingly diverse. I think the last 45, 40, 50 countries or something, two dozen languages. And what happens is at the student level, you see the embracement. You see people of varying backgrounds come into a class and they embrace each other and each other's cultures. I've never seen discord. And I've had courses where people have, disagreements on certain aspects of what we're learning, but culturally, it gives you a very strong, very connected sense of, I guess, community, where you realize everybody's got different backgrounds, but we're all the same community. One of the cool things where it comes together, for example, is whenever we have different ceremonies, like pinning ceremonies for nurses or graduation ceremonies for small groups, invariably there's food afterwards and the families bring the food. and because food culture is very important. And it's always interesting how it's not that somebody goes out to KFC and brings a bucket of chicken or something goes about. No, these people went home, cooked, and brought the food they serve at home to the school. And that's always struck me as big when they do that. So it's really a plus. And there are students that actually do come there because they like that comfort. I've had some that have gone to other schools and have said, you know, I just don't feel the same on campus. It's just different. I said, well, you know, Essex has, you know, everybody's accepted. There's not really, you know, at least visibly I can see, there's really not any much animosity. Everybody's there, everybody's working, everybody's got families, everybody's got issues. We're all here to learn, and that helps the other stuff sort of drop away. Now, in terms of primarily white institutions, some schools are starting to actually see that as a positive and try to embrace it and actually try to grow it. One of the things I like, not to brag, but at MIT, their new president has been pushing this a lot. And there have been years, at least from the 80s, when studies have been done at MIT to show, you know, you got these pockets, and there are pockets of diversity, but they're ignored, they're not embraced. You've got to do something. And this guy came in, I guess, 3 years ago. One of the first things he did was pulled in students and I believe pulled in staff and said, okay, we've got to make this place more diverse. What do we do? And so even though the numbers do not reflect a large, in terms of absolute numbers, I guess, not percentages, do not reflect a large diversity, the actions of the institution do. And when the institution says these things are important, that brings in others. So, but it's a top-down thing. You got to have the buy-in from the president, you got to buy-in from the board, or whatever the governing body is. That, you know, we only have 2% Asian American, but these things are important. And it's funny, even back in the 70s when I was there, 70s and early 80s, it still is primarily white institution, but and there were, you know, some disagreements on certain things that be written about in the paper. At the student level, most of us didn't care. It's kind of funny. The Chinese, when I was there in the 70s and early 80s, the Chinese Student Union had the best parties. I don't know why. They did the best. And the thing is, you could go to their parties and you get with an Essex ID. So if it was a weekend they were having a party, you wanted to go because it was going to be great, and it was.
Right.
They just did. Other groups would do things. The Black Student Union would do things. People would come. We had the Black Student Union. They did tutoring, and they had free tutoring for all MIT students. So, you know, you're not Black, that's okay. MIT student, yep, come on. What's the problem? Bio, good, and you go and you get tutoring. So you had it at that level, but I guess, and one of the things I do see is at the institutional level, while it wasn't at the student level, it's more it was, even then it was more embracing of different cultures. So what it requires is a top down to make the governing body and the employees understand we don't have large populations of these groups, but their input and their culture and these things are important, and they need to be part of our overall story, even if they're not the majority group at our institution.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so taking us in another direction of diversity. So what are your thoughts on the current Black Lives Matter movement? What areas of interest in education do you think are impacted by racism and can be improved upon?
Black Lives Matter is interesting. It's interesting to see, coming from have vague memories of the mid and late 60s and the troubles and all that time. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to see 21st century activism. It is broader, it is less centralized, and it is more diverse. Right. And I think it's interesting how with social platforms and the like, you can coalesce and have very productive activism very, very quickly. I realize it sometimes gets a bad name because, there's always going to be somebody who's going to take advantage of the situation to break a window or something. But it does call attention to things that need to be addressed. And a lot of times what that requires is listening and understanding. And I think where their biggest effects will be is for those that want to listen, because always be somebody who's not going to listen. There's not much you can do there. But for those that listen, they'll understand, and the empathy rises. And then, okay, so if I was a so and so in this situation, okay, I could see why this would make somebody nervous, or this would be an issue. So with more talking to each other, that'll help. And I think they've done a lot with that, and I'm glad to see it. I think it's wonderful. I think it's great how you have youth that can use social media and can use, mine's an old one, but one of these things.
Yeah.
And I've got the oldest one in the house, so everybody else's gets changed before mine. As long as I can call people, it's good. But using it as a way to bring people together and to say we have to address this issue, and to peaceably, it says in the Bill of Rights, to peaceably petition the government for a redress of grievances. Like, it's great. In terms of, I missed the second part of the racism question, which was something. What was it? I wrote it down actually.
Yeah.
What did I do? Oh, education impact on racism. What areas are impacted by racism? All areas. You'll see. I've seen it in various aspects throughout the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years in education. And usually it's pockets. So sometimes it's a little bit more.
Give me a specific example, because you don't have to use names, but give me a specific example so people understand what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. There was, let me see a good example. When I was in grad school, I took a course. It's a grad course. It's taught by older professor. Lord knows I don't remember the guy's name. White male, and it's some course. I guess is what they gave him to do until he retired. And I took the course and did talked about the first exam, and he had a few choice words about how he thought I did, and I said, okay, cool. So came back, did much better. Knew I wouldn't go pull an A on this course, so did much better on the last exam. Got the grade I needed, B for grad school. Thank you very much. Life went on. Am I going to change the opinion of me and what my abilities are? No. Also, another one I can think of, when I was in grad school, now this is going back to the 80s, so lab safety and the like, there's certain things for security was a little bit different. We all had the floor, I was in the microbiology department, and we had one floor, and there was a common key. Like I said, it's a different time. We had a common key for all the laboratories. And I was in one morning, it was a Saturday, and there's another guy who worked in another lab who came in. We knew each other on site, and he didn't have his key. Could he use mine? I said, yeah, sure. Took my keys out, gave them to him, went back to work. So he went down the hall, opened his door, came back, and on my key, I've still got it. It's in the other room. I've got a key ring that has a little MIT tag on. I got it like 1980 or something, but it's still there. Yeah. And he comes back with the keys, and he's looking at the keys, and he looks at me, and he says, you went to MIT? I said, yeah. And he says, you went to MIT? I think, oh, that's where this is going. Yes, I did. Yeah, so I was like, same sentence, but whole other meaning.
Yeah, right.
Yes, I did.
Right. Yes, I did.
Yeah,
and yes, I did had another meaning too.
There you go.
Yes, I did.
Yes, I did.
That's funny.
But
let's build on let's keep laughing. So, I know you're a train enthusiast.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your hobby and how it's grown and what it means to you and what's next for the train because I want to come see it.
All right. It's interesting. I picked up trains. I was doing model kits in the early 60s and 70s. I never had a train set. So Dad got me a train set, I think it's in 75 or 76. And I messed with that for a while, then put it away, then messed with it. And when I went to grad school, I picked it up again. There was a small train club in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go there like one night a month and hang out with the guys and run trains. And just something I do. But what I like in terms of where the hobby is now, I always wonder because the big push for trains in the 20th century is really the baby boomer group. So between 53 and 59, and the hobby had been sort of stagnating or floating for a long period of time. And then in the 90s, I guess the mid 90s, you had a lot more stuff coming out with more detail, more electronics, things you could run off your phone, things you could use remote control on, so it wasn't just hooking up to wires, and just sound and other active electronics that you could put in,
Mm-hmm.
and having Thomas the Train Engine on for kids TV didn't hurt either.
Right.
And then once internet and other things came in, particularly Facebook, I found the groups on Facebook. I'm actually in a group called the Original Black Model Railroaders, and it's a bunch of brothers who all have trains. And the thing is, I'm the old guy. Everybody there is in their 30s.
Yeah.
And you see their house, and they, here's their house, and here's what I'm working on, and it's just what they do.
That's pretty
And
cool. Yeah.
so one thing that's different is it's going now that a lot of the stuff comes out of China. It's in the old days there was a lot of kit and a lot of building. Now you could, with enough money, you can get everything ready built, put everything together, hit 2 buttons on your phone, everything runs. So it's a lot more in terms of operation and scenery and a few other things.
Yeah.
But
I know I was into the HO scale cars.
oh yeah, that's what I started with. And
yeah. So I don't know if you remember those electric cars and.
Oh yeah, the Thunderjets and AFX. Oh yeah, had those. In fact, that's what I was running in the late '60s, early '70s. Partly because
I got a little family story there.
Yeah,
I had this beautiful set of HO set cars, and I had 2 brothers.
Yeah.
And they got mad at me one day. They flushed my HO cars down the toilet.
Oh man,
that was like it killed me.
Oh.
It was like because you know how special they were, right?
Oh yeah, and they weren't cheap. I mean, on a relative scale for the time, that's a weak allowance.
I had some classics, and
Mhm.
like, oh man, that hurt. It was like I never forgot.
Yeah. Oh gee. Oh wow.
My brothers since they did that.
I'm sure they got a talking to later in the day.
Well, they got to make up. They need to buy me some new electric cars. Then they might forgive them. So
there you go. Maybe you think about it.
Yeah.
Even those cars, apparently they're still made, but they there's I think it's still there. There's a hobby shop in Scotch Plains near me, and I was in there once and I saw these. It looked like the old Thunderjet cars, the old AFXs, and
right.
But they were running them with multiple on one track, and just like with the trains, it wasn't so much they needed the electricity. The electricity ran the decoders in the cars, so
Right.
you can have multiple cars on one track or on one lane, and the controllers would tell, or the digital command would tell it what to do. So it was much more realistic, racing stuff, but they were all built like the older, the stuff we had.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're running up on our time limit. It's been a fantastic hour here. First one, thank you. So, one more question, then I'm gonna let you take us out. So, can you talk about your current family and what are your hopes and dreams for the future?
Okay. Well, when I went to MIT, we had a freshman picnic on September 1st, 1978. And I met a young lady from North Carolina that day.
Okay.
And married her 4 years later. And 38 years plus down the road, still together. Got 2 kids, one of each, only come in 2 flavors, male and female. So my daughter's in her mid-20s. She's an aspiring science fiction, short story, children's author. And
cool.
my son is 23. Yeah, 23. And he's in he's finishing up a engineering program, and he's like his mom. His mom is also an engineer, and he's working on an engineering degree at Temple. He will probably have his master's, his ME in like a year and a half, I think.
All right,
Yeah,
fantastic.
hopes
Beautiful.
and aspirations for the future. Um, Sanity and talking to each other in government would be nice.
Yeah.
That may be a big push.
Well, let me ask you, do you see retirement in the future? Because you've been going. Do you see yourself retiring?
Well, it's kind of funny. My son says I can't retire till he's 26, so I guess no. Um, we've had that discussion, Kathy and I, and it's I don't know. For right now, and for right now, she's looking at taking on more positions within she's a chemical engineer, and she just got elected fellow to the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. Now they want her to be secretary. So, and she's a chemical engineer with ExxonMobil. So she may be there a little bit longer, depending on how the oil things go.
Mhm.
And now that I'm back, I spent 4 years as vice president. Now I'm back in faculty. And I just came off the meeting with some of our other students, our alumni, and found out the current director of our honors program is looking at stepping down and wants me to pick it up. Okay. So I was like, oh, okay, that's another 3 years. Nathan says I can't I can't finish till he's 26. That's 3. I don't know. For right now, it's working. One of the things I try to look at is look at the health and look at the time.
Mhm.
So as long as there are things I can do where I'm still healthy, I still got a little bit of time to spend with the family, it's good. But it's coming. It'll be there eventually. But for right now, and it's kind of funny because if one thing about love or hating the pandemic, like I have a 2-minute commute going from here to the bedroom, so I'm not missing that hour in the morning back and forth to North.
Right.
But eventually, yeah, we every now and then you look at the list of what you want to do. What we have looked at, the planning and when the house gets paid off and some other things. So this time in about, I don't know, 2 years, maybe 3 years, reassess, and that's probably about when I'd say like in like next 3 to 5 to particularly because like in my dad's case, like I said, my dad passed in '08. He had prostate cancer.
Mhm.
Now I don't have I don't have issues or has things checked, but I do have those genetics. So it's like, okay, on my mom's side, they tend to, I've got on my mom's 90, I've got an aunt that's 103. But on my dad's side, I mean, not much to go on, and he just about made 80. I'm 60 this year, so it's like, how much longer do you want to work? So I'm thinking,
Yeah.
in about, it's a year-to-year thing, almost a week-to-week thing now, but it's the as I say, I'll put it this way. I've moved into elder status. So at work, it's more of the stepping back, it's more of the training the younger faculty how to and administrators how to do things
Mhm.
and taking less, I tell people I'll help you do stuff. You've got to run it. I did these things for 20 plus years. Now you've got to do it. So as I gradually step back, and I'm figuring, like I said, you look very comfortable. I'm assuming you're retired. So it looks like it's working. So I was
Well,
like, yeah.
let me tell you, it's one, it's a transition. I wish
Mm-hmm,
I had done it sooner. I did at 56, but I did my 30 years,
mm-hmm.
and 30 years was enough. I kind of, you kind of accomplish what you want to accomplish. And I just wanted to do something different. I didn't want to just keep doing something, keep doing it. I just figured
Yeah.
that I could make a bigger contribution elsewhere, and you know, it's not like I was retired. I'm just transferring skills to another area, and it took me a little time to figure it out, traction.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know. So I'm not. I'm retired, but I'm not retired.
There you go. You're just doing something different.
Yeah, just doing something different. So that's how I think you should think about retirement. It's not that you're retired; you're just doing something different.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going out. I'm going downstairs to eat after this. We'll have to talk, doing something different, because we did have that discussion a couple of months ago, and one of the things that came up is, I guess, good place to leave your listeners is time, because that's, you can do a lot of things. You can't get time. You can't buy time. You can't get time back.
Get it back.
And that's one of the reasons why I guess I'm glad I'm back in faculty, because it gives more time. And if it looks like I want to get more time for doing other things, then
Go with it.
Essex will be in a good place. It's got good people. It'll be okay. It'll survive.
Right.
And find the time when it's right to step back and do some other things. So we'll see.
Well, we're kind of running out of time, Jeff. I'll let you take us out. So why don't you speak to our viewers some final words of wisdom, or we'll say happy holidays. Is your floor. You earn the time.
The new phrase I came up with this year is marry everything. Hopefully that covers whatever it is you do or don't do. Stay warm, stay safe. It's going to be an interesting winter. It's going to be an interesting spring, but there will be a spring. And, I always like what Angela Merkel said in Germany when she gave her first talk to the entire country back in the midst of the pandemic. Take care of yourselves and take care of your loved ones. And Dr. Daniels, thank you for this opportunity. It's good seeing you, man.
Good seeing you, Jeff. And see you on the other side for a couple of minutes, but really appreciate you. The foundation appreciates you, and happy holidays.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
See you in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.